Okay. If you want to look at the subtlety, we're going to talk about the two major holidays of Passover and Sukkot, Pesach and Sukkot. Both are related in the sense that they both start on the 15th day of the month. The other third biblical holiday, Shavuot, is another story, which again is a little bit different than the other model, because the other two holidays, because there is no date of the month for Shavuot. The way you figure out what Shavuot is, you just simply count 50 days from Passover. So, but looking at the two holidays, Pesach and Shavuot, that both of them are 7-day holidays. After Sukkot, you have an 8th day, that's the Atzeret. But Pesach and Sukkot both have 7-day holidays. Both begin on the 15th of the month. Okay, but if you start looking at the names and how the Torah refers to them, so the Torah refers to Pesach, what we would call Pesach, as Chag HaMatzot, the holiday of the matzah. So it doesn't really talk about, we call it Passover. The Torah doesn't really call this holiday Passover. In fact, in the Torah, Passover is really not the holiday of Passover, but it's the day before. Because if you think about it, the day before Passover, the 14th of Nisan, was the day that they offered the Pesach offering. So when the Torah says on the 14th day, make a Pesach. Pesach means a Pesach offering. So it became the custom that people refer to the holiday as Pesach. The Jews refer to it as Pesach, but the Torah does not refer to it as Pesach. The Torah refers to it as Chag HaMatzot, the holiday of the matzah. Now, there's a very beautiful commentator, a Hasidic commentator, one of the Hasidic masters, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Uparditchev, and he says a beautiful concept. He says, why is it that the Torah refers to it in one name, and yet the people refer to it with another name? And he says like this: the Jewish people want to praise Hashem. So they name a name to the holiday that highlights Hashem's praise. Whereas God chooses a name that highlights the praise of the Jewish people. So each one is praising the other one, and that's why we don't use the same name. How so? So what does Chag HaMatzot emphasize? The holiday of the matzah. The concept of matzah is a praise to the Jews. How so? Because the Jewish people are willing to follow God into the desert, even though they have no food. They have no tuna sandwiches. They only have a little bit of dough. So the concept that they follow God into the desert is a tremendous act of faith on the part of the Jewish people. And that is why God refers to the holiday as the holiday of matzah, because that's exactly what that highlights the praise of the Jewish people. The Jewish people, however, don't refer to it as the holiday of matzah, which is a praise for them. Instead, they refer to it as the holiday of Pesach. What's Pesach? Passing over. What does that refer to? The fact that God passed over the Jewish homes in order to save the Jewish people. So that's a praise for God. So that's just an aside, the fact that the Torah doesn't refer to the holiday the same name as we do. Torah, the God is praising us, we're praising God. Okay, going back to our subject. The Torah refers to this in this week's parsha as the holiday as the holiday of matzot. But here there's a subtle difference. I'm going to read the verse. On the 15th of this month, meaning the first month, Chag HaMatzot LaHashem. It will be a holiday of the matzah for God. It doesn't say that all 7 days are referred to as the holiday of matzot, right? It says on the 15th day, which is the first day of the holiday. It says the 15th day would be the holiday of matzah. And then elsewhere it says make a celebration for 7 days. But it doesn't say, you don't have the quote, make a holiday of matzot for 7 days. That quote does not exist. The concept that we eat matzah for 7 days is sort of a few quotes together. We say on the 15th, make a holiday of matzot. And then it says, yes, have a holiday for 7 days. And then it says, eat matzah for 7 days. But it's 3 separate verses. Whereas, if you want to compare it to the Sukkot, it says, a festival of Sukkot for 7 days to God. Okay? In other words, immediately we say all 7 days are referred to as the festival of Sukkot. What is really happening here? What's really happening here is like this. There's a big difference between Passover and Sukkot, and that's what we're trying to get at. The big difference is that Passover is a holiday separate and apart from the matzah. In other words, even if there would be no commandment to eat matzah, even if I don't have any matzah, the holiday is still a holiday. Why? Because it's commemorating the time of the redemption, of the Exodus. So Passover has the theme. What is the theme of Passover? What is the theme of Passover? God took us out of Egypt. What do we do on that holiday? We eat matzah for 7 days. But the point here is that matzah is not critical. It's not the essence. It's not the only component of the holiday, because the holiday has its own inherent holiness, which is what? Which is the time, the anniversary of the liberation. So in other words, if I ask you, what is the theme of Passover? One of the themes is matzah. It's not the only theme. There's liberation, there's the fact that we became a people, the fact that we became free, etc., etc. Okay. In contrast, when you talk about Sukkot, what happened on Sukkot? So it's funny that Sukkot is the only holiday that is the anniversary of nothing. Nothing happened on Sukkot. Passover is the anniversary of the Exodus. Shavuot is the anniversary of the giving of the Torah. Yom Kippur is the anniversary of the time that God gave the Jewish people the second tablets, which represents the forgiveness. Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the birth of Adam. Every holiday is the anniversary of something. What happened on Sukkot? Nothing happened on Sukkot. 15th day of 15th day of Tishrei, of the 7th month. Look in the history. Nothing happened on that day. Why do we celebrate? Why do we celebrate that day? I don't know. It doesn't say. There's no day. So, in other words, let's take a second and talk about this for a second. In other words, let's talk about this for a second. The Medrash says that the big question of why Sukkot, why do we celebrate Sukkot when we do? Why do we celebrate Sukkot? So the Torah tells you the reason. The Torah says, because when God took us out of Egypt, the Torah says, I placed the Jewish people in Sukkot, in huts when they left Egypt. So to commemorate the Exodus and the huts that we sat in when we left Egypt, we sit in the Sukkah. And that's a wonderful interpretation. The only question is, so why are we separating it from the holiday of the Exodus? In other words, if that's the case, we left Egypt, we sat in huts. So maybe we should have our Seder in the Sukkah. Maybe we should sit in the hut in the Sukkah. Why do you have 6 months after the Exodus, we remember, oh yeah, we're going to have a festival. We're going to eat in the Sukkah. And that's going to commemorate the Exodus from Egypt, which happened 6 months ago. So the Medrash has an interpretation. The Medrash interpretation is as follows. There's a problem. We can't have, if all the people go outside, if the Jewish people eat in the Sukkah in the springtime, nobody realizes that it's for the mitzvah, because everybody is going outside to eat in the huts, right? In the olden days, even today in the Middle East, not everywhere there's air conditioning. So you go outside, and basically in the spring, you live outside. That's what you do. It's where you eat. That's where you drink. That's where you spend time. Maybe you don't sleep there. I don't know. Even you sleep there. You sleep there. My grandmother says that in the summer they would sleep on the fire escapes in Brooklyn because there was no air conditioning. In any case, everybody is going outside. So the Medrash says if the Jewish people go outside and sit in the Sukkah, no one realizes it's for the mitzvah. So what does God say? God says, you know what? Let's wait 6 months. Let's wait till everybody comes inside. And if everybody comes inside, then the Jewish people are going outside, then it's clear, then it's evident that it's for the mitzvah. That's the Medrash's interpretation. But the bottom line is, any way you think about it, there's no inherent holiness in the holiday of Sukkot. It doesn't commemorate a special time that something occurred in that time. And that's why the mystical perspective is the Torah has to say that the holiday for 7 days is the holiday of Sukkot. meaning to say the sukkah is the essence of the holiday. What makes it unique is the fact that Jewish people are commanded to build the sukkah. Again, contrast that to Passover, that the holiday of Passover is unique even without the commandment to eat matzah. The holiday of Passover is the anniversary of the Exodus, and that's what we celebrate. Oh, there's a commandment that on this special day, eat matzah. But even if there theoretically would not be a commandment to eat matzah, there would still be a reason to celebrate. Whereas Sukkot, nothing happened on Sukkot. So what are we commemorating? We're just commemorating what makes this day holy. It's just that God commanded us to sit in the sukkah. So that's a very interesting difference. And in the sense, in the understanding of what the holiday is, Passover, the time itself is inherently holy, whereas Sukkot, the entire holiday is just the concept that because of the commandment, because God commanded us to make the sukkah, that is why we sit in the sukkah, and that commandment is what makes that time holy, but inherently nothing really happened on that day. Okay, what does that really mean for us? What does it mean? We're not just talking theoretically about what's the essence of the day. Is the essence of the day Passover is an inherent holiness, and then the mitzvah to eat matzah is just layered above that. Whereas with the sukkah, it's different. Whereas with the sukkah, the time of the sukkah is not holy. It's just that it becomes holy by the virtue of the commandment of the human being to make the sukkah. What does that mean to us in our own service of God? And what we're going to say is as follows. The big idea here is like this. That Passover and Sukkot are completely different concepts. Passover is, could we connect? The idea of Passover is to stop and to connect to the holiness that exists within the world, right? Because we talk about this, the fact that when it's an anniversary of a holiday, so I like to say that the Torah doesn't really believe in anniversaries. What do I mean? I mean to say that it's not just that we're commemorating something that happened in the past, but in reality, what Judaism is telling us, that same energy that existed on this day, all those years ago, that same energy is available to us today, and that's what we celebrate. We celebrate that energy is prevalent in the world. So if Passover is the time where God expressed his love to the people and freed the people, then every year on Passover, that opportunity and that energy is accessible and available in the world, and that's what we celebrate. So we stop and we tune in to the holiness that exists within the world already. But who produced that holiness? Who created that holiness? Not the people. That's God. That was God's doing. What happens on Sukkot? Sukkot, there is nothing holy about this time inherently. What makes it holy is that the people are called upon to sanctify that time by building the sukkah. So this is a completely different model. It's not tuning into the holiness that already exists within the world. It's creating your own measure of holiness. So it's a completely different concept. Where do you see this playing out in those two holidays of Passover and Sukkot? So there's a fascinating ramification. What is the mitzvah of Passover? Mitzvah of Passover is to eat matzah. Now matzah, some people eat matzah all year, but not everybody will eat matzah all year. In other words, I'm only doing it because it's a mitzvah. I'm only doing it because it's a commandment. Who commanded? Who told me to eat this? God told me to eat this. So again, the whole holiday, and even the way we practice the holiday, is we're tuning in to the holiness that God created, and we're doing it in the way that God told us to. Okay, fine. Let's look at sukkahs. The sukkah is to eat in the sukkah, to sit in the sukkah. Okay, but what should I do in the sukkah? Is there a specific food you have to eat in the sukkah? Like matzah at the Seder? No, there's no specific food. Why? All it says is dwell in the sukkah for 7 days. And dwell, says the Talmud, it means behave in the sukkah like you would behave in your home. Whatever you do in your home, do in the sukkah. What's really happening here? Everything you do in your sukkah, your mundane activities and food and everything else you do, they become holy because they're in the sukkah. But the bottom line is, God doesn't dictate what should be the holiness of the sukkah. It's up to you. Whatever you do in the sukkah then becomes holy. Again, unlike Passover, there's no mitzvah to eat chicken soup at the Passover Seder. The Passover Seder, the mitzvah is to eat matzah. On Sukkot, what's the mitzvah? Eat whatever you want. That's the mitzvah. Whatever you bring into the sukkah then becomes holy. So what we're saying is, in the sukkah, the measure of the human ability to generate holiness in a place where there was no natural holiness, that is expressed in the sukkah, in the mitzvah, in the holiday of Sukkot. Number one, in the concept of the time. The time itself was not inherently holy, but it becomes holy only by virtue of something the Jewish people are going to do. And number two, the way we celebrate the holiday. How is the holiday celebrated? What aspect of our life becomes sanctified? Not just by Passover, it's whatever Hashem says. Hashem says eat matzah, so we'll eat matzah. By Sukkot, it's whatever you do in the context of the sukkah, that becomes the mitzvah. So who decides what to bring into the sukkah? Who decides what activity and what food is going to be elevated? It's the human being. It's a whole different model. And what we're saying is the lesson of Sukkot, so you celebrate the Sukkot, it's very nice to hear about Sukkot. We're a few months away from Sukkot. We're only talking about it because that's the context of, that's in the Parsha mentions all the holidays. But the lesson of the Sukkah is a lot deeper. The lesson of the Sukkah is that we have the ability to create holiness even when there's no holiness, even in times that are not inherently holy. And not only in times that are not inherently holy, but also with the activities. There's nothing unique about that activity. Unlike eating matzah, which is inherently a holy mitzvah. Again, Passover, you go into the sukkah and you read your Wall Street Journal and you drink coffee, that's a mitzvah. Whatever you're doing in the context of the sukkah becomes a mitzvah. So that's one big idea. If anyone has comments or questions, please share. And if not, we'll take it a step further. Okay, so let's add a little bit of detail here for a few minutes, and then that will be it for today. Sorry again for the delay. Regarding the holidays, there's a whole subject matter that we touched upon in the beginning, but there's a big ramification. What's the big ramification? About the fact that there's a second day of holiday outside of Israel. So thank God here today we have some people in Israel, some people out of Israel, so it's relevant to everybody. So in other words, in the Torah, there's 7-day holidays for Passover, and it says the first day is holy and the last day is holy. Meaning the first day you can't do labor, you can't do work, and the last day you can't do work. Outside of Israel, instead of the first day on the 7th day, in other words, day 15 and day 22, we do 2 days. So day 1 and 2 of the holiday is holy, and day 7 and 8. So we add an extra day to the holidays outside of Israel. Why do we do so? How come if you're outside of Israel, you have to have 2 Passover Seders? If you go to Israel, you only have to have 1 Passover Seder. Get a better deal. So the history and the technical reason, the legal reason is straightforward. We'll offer that, and then we'll give the mystical reason. And the mystical reason ties into what we're saying over here, what we were saying earlier. So the simple reason is, the straightforward reason is because going back to the time where the holidays were determined by the court in Jerusalem. So if I'm living outside of Israel, distant from Jerusalem, by the time day 15 arrives, I have no idea what day 1 is, and therefore when day 15 is. So day 1 could be either Monday or Tuesday. Day 15 could therefore be either Monday or Tuesday. So I don't know when the holiday is. So because they were in doubt, in Aramaic it's called steika diyoma, the doubt about the day. So because they didn't know, they celebrated 2 days. But in Israel, you have 15 days, 2 weeks. That's enough time for the messengers from the high court to reach the entire Israel. And therefore, everyone in Israel knew when day 1 is. Therefore, they knew when day 15 is, and they could celebrate 1 day holiday. Outside of Israel, we weren't sure. So you have to have 2 days of holiday because of the doubt. That's the history. The reality is that at a certain point in our history, about 1800 years ago, they stopped sanctifying the new month based on the moon. They set up the calendar. Why that is another story. Now we do know when day 1 is, and therefore we do know when day 15 is. So then the question is, why do we have to celebrate 2 days of holiday outside of Israel? Why don't we all celebrate the holiday in Israel, the holiday for 1 day like Israel? So the Talmud says, quoted by Maimonides and all the codifiers, it says simple thing, it's minhag aviseinu biyadenu. We basically, the custom of our ancestors is, we preserve the custom of our ancestors, and therefore our ancestors outside of Israel did 2 days. So therefore, rabbinically, there's a rabbinic commandment to maintain that custom of our ancestors, even though the reasoning does not apply anymore. So this is just a trivia question. If someone asks you, why do we keep 2 days? If you say it's because we weren't sure about when the holiday is, and it's not completely accurate, because today we do know. The accurate answer is because we're preserving the custom of our ancestors. Okay. Now, if that's the legal reason, it's a wonderful reason, but it's very hard to generate inspiration, right? Because I'm sitting on my second Passover. I'm trying to be second day of Passover, second Seder, trying to inspire myself. I'm trying to get excited about eating the matzah and eating the bitter herbs again. And I'm like, what is this? This is not really, the Torah didn't really mandate this, right? This is just rabbinic. And it's only because it's not even, there's a doubt that maybe today is Passover. I understand our ancestors at some point, 2,000 years ago, outside of Israel, they weren't sure, maybe tonight's Passover, so you have to do it again. But today we know it's not Passover. And we're doing it the second day anyway. For what? For when? Preserve the custom? So I understand it's an obligation, so we'll do it. But where's the inspiration? So here you have the Hasidic perspective. And the Hasidic perspective says, in some ways, the fact that outside of Israel, we have 2 days holiday, it's not just because of the confusion, and therefore now we want to preserve the custom of our ancestors. That's not enough. There's actually a deeper dimension. The deeper dimension is that outside of Israel, because we don't have the inherent holiness of Israel, which is available to the people in Israel, we have to generate an additional day. And the additional day that we generate is man-made, but it's man-made holiness. In other words, the rabbis insist that, you know what, we're going to insist and say that the second day we add a day. It's not because of the doubt. The doubt is only the historic reason, but there's a reason for every reason. In other words, there's an inner reason. And the inner reason is that outside of Israel, we don't have as much as the holiness generated from Hashem. We have to therefore produce our own holiness and decide and sanctify this day. And in some sense, because we're distant, we need more holiness and more joy. But the beauty is that this is a day that the people instituted. And that shows the power of the people to bring holiness even to places when holiness is not there innately. So if you want to just think about this, just to summarize everything we said, the concept of holidays, we're taking this many, many steps. The concept of, in other words, how much is the human involvement? So Shabbat is one extreme. Shabbat, there's no human involvement at all. God determines when Shabbat is. All the holidays, there's some human influence. Okay. But within those holidays, there's also a spectrum. Passover, yes, we decide when Passover is, we decide when day 15 is, but something happened on day 15. Day 15 commemorates something that God did for us. Okay, so it's just we're commemorating something that already exists. Sukkot, God tells us to sanctify a day that nothing happened in that day. In other words, the Torah tells us that we could sanctify things that are not necessarily inherently holy. That's the power of the person, that's the power of the Jew. Not only could we sanctify the time, but we actually could sanctify activities. Which activities? Unlike Passover, where the activity is mandated, the mitzvah is to eat matzah. On Sukkot, what's a mitzvah? Whatever you do in the sukkah is a mitzvah. It highlights the power of the human being to decide what and how becomes holy. Then you get to the final step, which in some sense is the most distant from the Torah, but from the Hasidic perspective is actually the most profound in some sense. That's the second day of the holiday outside of Israel, where not only did nothing happen, especially the second day of Sukkot, not only nothing happened, not only God didn't tell us to sanctify it, we the people, keeping the mitzvah of the rabbis, but the rabbis are people. So we, the people, add an additional day of holiness, and we sanctify that day, and that day becomes holiness. So is that inspirational? Well, it depends. If you're looking just from the historic perspective, it's not inspirational. It's just a product of preserving the unknown, and so we don't know. So we have a technical reason why we have to keep 2 days. So it's not inspirational. But from the mystical perspective, it's in some sense more inspirational than the first days, because the first days tells you that you have the ability to tap into the holiness that God makes available to you. The second day tells you the people have the power to generate their own man-made holiness, and in some sense, man-made holiness is more profound because if it's made by the people, then it could be internalized by the people and generated by the people, and therefore it affects the people much more than if it's superimposed from above. So this is the story in short, sort of a overview of the difference between Passover and all the other holidays. And within the other holidays is a spectrum, of course, of how much we are generating on our own, and it's highlighted on Sukkot and highlighted even more in the second day of the holiday. Thank you all for joining. Comments, questions, welcome. Discussions, welcome. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, and it's always wonderful to spend time together. So thank you, very much appreciated.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Take care.